Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Betting Pros podcast. It is NFL Week 8. We are pretty much at the halfway point of the season now, and joining us today to help break down the rankings, break down what we're looking at this point. And of course, it can't be an easy halfway clean because now we have 17 games on the slate. Still bothers me, Matt. But joining us today, we have a very special guest here. He's got a dog's name because he's got that dog in him. Rufus Peabody joining the show. Rufus, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing great. Just had a nice weekend. Went back up, saw the family, saw my goddaughter for the first time. It was a nice time in the Bay Area. And as I left, there was apparently an earthquake today, so I got out at the right time. Matt, how are you doing?
Doing well. It's another, great week of NFL action. So just happy to be here. And it's great to have Rufus on the show. I'm a longtime listener of his podcast, Bet the Process podcast with Jeff Ma. I think one of the, it's not entertaining. Let's be honest. It's not entertaining, but it's
boring.
still one of the best sports betting podcasts out there.
Thanks.
A fantastic endorsement of it's not entertaining, but we'll try and entertain you guys here today. And seriously, do go check out Bet the Process. Get that listener count up to 8 because, again, fantastic show. And it's great to get a look inside your and Jeff Ma's thought processes behind how you guys mostly just rag on each other, but also occasionally give out some betting advice on it. And today, of course, we're going to be talking about plenty of stuff here. When it comes to power rankings, there is nothing better than the Massey-Peabody system in terms of just a guidebook that you can look to start basing a lot of what you're doing off of. We're going to be breaking that down a little bit, but first let's talk about a little bit about you, Rufus. First off, how did you get your start in gambling?
That's a good question, and it certainly was not intentional. I talked my way into an internship at this company called Las Vegas Sports Consultants after reading an article in ESPN.com and learning about that this company existed, and I ended up doing my senior thesis on psychological inefficiencies in the baseball betting market, getting a full-time job offer at LVSC that paid me next to nothing, but I moved out to Vegas, knew nobody, slowly built a bankroll betting, while working and learning a lot from a lot of old school bookmaker types, and happened to be in the right place in the right time, met the right people that were willing to take a chance on me, and have been betting for a living since 2009.
Now, Rufus, I have a quick follow up. I'm going to ignore some of what Tom puts in the outline. He can ask the structured questions, but so you have the statement there, learned a lot from old school bookmakers, and so you have a very quantitative approach. But I'm imagining that there's a lot that informs it. That has to do with the way that, kind of like quote unquote, like old school bookmakers would think, like you're sort of like quantifying some things that for them were maybe more intuitive or things that had just been based on years and years of knowledge. Can you talk about some of the things that you did learn from old school bookmakers and then like how that's in your model?
Yeah, I think I learned how to think in a lot of ways. I mean, they think about things creatively. And actually, I remember one of the projects I did for Kenny White was he wanted me to look and try to find the value of different statistics in projecting out some power rating system that he had built. How much was a rebound worth relative to, a mid-range jumper, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think it was as specific as mid-range jumper, but I remember like running some regressions and basically coming up with numbers that were like eerily close to what he had figured out kind of intuitively on his own. And I was just so impressed that, he could do that. Maybe he had some other statistics person, a few years ago do the same thing and didn't tell me that. But I was like, how the hell can you do that? Like just intuitively on your own. But I think I came out there a little bit arrogant and thinking that I could solve everything just quantitatively. And I think I learned a lot of the limits of that and just, these guys had made it so long in this industry by coming up with, by asking the right questions and thinking about things in a unique way, in a logical way. And I think that has been, my biggest, source of alpha betting over my career has been asking the right questions and thinking about things creatively, because there's a lot of people out there that can, do quantitative analysis that, have much more advanced statistical backgrounds than I do, but it's about asking the right questions of the data. And so you can't just toss it into a computer and have the computer come up with all the answers for you, like some people believe machine learning does. Um, but or if you do, you're probably not going to do very well betting. But so I think I learned a way of thinking.
That's an interesting point you bring up about the limits of quantitative analysis. Where did you start to find that you were pressing up against the ceiling there, that you had to start incorporating some of these other methods?
It's not a ceiling as much as it is that there's certain things that you can't quantify, and it's really important to know what you don't know. And I think sometimes people can be too confident in the fact, that you're quantifying everything, or you think you are. But if you don't understand the weaknesses and the things you can't quantify, you're not going to. I mean, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. I mean, you might be right in general, but there'll be exceptions that you run into, and that's the case with any modeling system. I mean, there's every model has a flaw in some way. You're not going to be able to capture everything, and if you understand the limits and how the model is built, you can sort of spot those weak points. I mean, there's also, I don't know, there's also things like, I mean, injuries, unless you're quantifying every player, which is really freaking hard to do, especially in a sport like the NFL where you don't have a huge amount of data overall, and you have all these players playing together, and the value of one depends on the value of the other in a way. And so it's a really, really, I mean, modeling football is a really challenging endeavor in that regard, for sure.
Yeah, it's very true. Models can have so many different flaws in them. You can put in just bad data. You can have some sort of error in the way that you're computing it. They can divorce you because you return to play your 21st season in the NFL. A lot of things can go wrong with them. But specifically in the NFL market here, you don't actually handicap that much NFL anymore. And it was a really amusing Twitter conversation at the beginning of the season that I saw between you and I forget who it was, but someone was basically calling you out for being on the golf course the day before the NFL season began.
Steve Fezzik.
Yeah, and you were just like, "Well, I mean, I'm not going to bet on the NFL, so I don't have to care about it. I'm going to go play golf and enjoy myself right now." But what is it that makes the NFL market so hard for people to bet into?
So first off, it isn't, I mean, the way that I do most of my work in a way before the season begins. The work is
Mhm.
spent building the model, and then during the season, it's sort of babysitting and implementing things, and you have these systems to do it. So I'm not, I, I, I don't make my money researching, reading up on teams, anything like that. I try to capture everything that I can in my model, and the things I don't, that then I don't. And clearly, I try to pay attention to injuries and stuff like that. But what your question is, what makes the NFL so difficult? It is the most efficient. It's the biggest sports betting market in the United States, and so it's the most efficient, at least for sides and totals. And we've, I think we've bet less on the NFL, or fewer things within the NFL, in previous years. I mean, we were always betting sort of Sunday and Monday openers for the next week. We bet futures and things like that, but it's just it's because of the size of the market, and the amount of data out there. I mean, and the amount of attention on it. It's very, very, very difficult to beat the NFL on game day. It's a really freaking efficient market, and there's not that many games either. So, like, if you're attacking the NFL, there's a lot of profitable areas to attack, but it just wouldn't be the prime, like, sides and totals. I mean, there's a lot
Rufus,
of great derivatives, there's props,
yeah.
there's all sorts of things.
You just mentioned there historically betting the earlier lines, Sunday and Monday, and so you as a professional bettor, a bankroll that is sizable enough to need to be deployed to where it makes sense to do this professionally. My question would be sort of like, if you're betting earlier, you always hear about limits earlier in the week. And that's especially the case if you're betting even on the look ahead lines.
Oh yeah.
Um, but is it feasible, not for someone to be a professional bettor betting on look aheads and early lines, but to be able to put down enough action to where it's, maybe like a source of supplemental income if you're doing it well?
For the NFL, you can get down a good amount early in the week still. Yes. But I think the thing with the NFL that I think is worth mentioning is just how few games there are in a given season. And
Yeah.
so you have so few and the fact that the lines are pretty sharp means that it just is not, while it drives a lot of content and stuff like that, it's, betting NFL sides is, even if I'm doing it early in the week and getting great prices, it's not going to be a huge source of income for me just because there are only 200, there was 256 games. Now you have another 16, so 272 regular season games. It's just when that pales in comparison to the number of Major League Baseball games you have, NBA, even college football, and college basketball is like insane. So
Yeah.
And college basketball, the amount of surface area there to attack is just so incredible.
yeah, I mean, but the thing is, it's I still watch the NFL. It's hard to not want to bet the NFL a little bit just because I feel like, I mean, once I stopped betting a sport, I kind of almost stopped paying attention to it. Typically, that's kind of what happened with me in baseball. I don't miss it one bit, to be honest. But I feel like it would be very weird to not watch NFL games or care. But I think people in my life would be very happy that I would, have more weekend time available.
But the nice thing about the NFL with those shortened with the 272 games is that it's not the same grind as the other sports of it's this
Yeah.
long season. And so, it's 17 Sundays and change for us throughout the season. And then we're back to normal life and you get to enjoy your weekends again doing something that isn't watching football.
Watching golf.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Golf is absolutely the one sport I cannot handle on TV. I went to the President's Cup when I was a kid. Amazing experience. Almost got run over by one of the golfers. Mike Weir said hi to me, and we were 2 feet away from Tiger Woods. You can't do that in any other sport. Watching it on TV, the non-linearity of it just messes me up so badly that I get frustrated with it.
It's
Like, I
gotten
don't like
better in terms of like the shot tracer technology and all that stuff, the top tracer, whatever it's called. So you can kind of see the flight path of the ball. Cause I think that's the coolest thing, be able to see how these guys shape the balls. But
yeah. For me, the frustrating part is how they bounce back and forth. Like, I don't want to be on the 5th hole and then go to the 9th hole. I want to follow a golfer. But I digress here because as much as I know that you would love to talk about golf all day long here, let's get into the NFL a little bit more here, and specifically the Massey-Peabody system. It's, of course, available on unabated.com, the NFL power rankings that you update each and every week here. And what is it that they mean necessarily? Because it's not just a system of you going in and saying the Bills are better than the Chiefs, so the Bills are my number one team, and obviously this is all below the Seahawks and Geno Smith, but still,
well, yes.
what is it that is going in? What's the secret that's making the sauce here with this system when you go to approach it every week?
So Cade and I developed this back, or initially 2000, before the 2010 season. This guy Michael Salfino, who he wrote, I think, for the Meadowlands Media Group, and he and Cade talked, and they had this idea to build this rating system because the Wall Street Journal was interested, and so we ended up doing that. And it was very simple in its ambitions at the beginning. It was saying, and it still is in a way. I mean, I think the beauty of it is the simplicity of the framework for it. We take just a few statistics that we find to be meaningful predictively, and we contextualize them very well. So, I guess a team playing, what's a good example? What was a bad weather game or a team? I don't know. I mean,
the Bears Niners week 1.
Yeah. Okay. The Bears, right. Like I wouldn't compare like that weather. That's an extreme example, but you put every team is going to struggle on offense in those particular weather conditions. Right. So you control for the strength of the opponent, you control for the game situation, you control for, on a particular play, like what is a team's down by 27 points, the other team is playing a soft zone late in the third quarter, they're going to be able to get some yards there, but it doesn't say they're a good team. It doesn't translate. So it's about contextualizing performance, de-weighting sort of less predictive garbage time. And so we have a algorithm that does that, controlling for strength of opponent, as I said, in home field, and I guess weighting each metric by its predictive value going forward. So a good example is something like turnovers, and especially fumble recovery luck or fumble recovery percentage, or whatever you want to call it. Like fumbles, who recovers them are almost entirely luck. There's no persistent skill. If you told me that this team recovered, 85% of fumbles the first half of the year, I would still expect that they would recover 50% of fumbles the second half of the year. I mean, so that kind of thing can really, could be implicated strongly in final scores and your assessment of a team. And so we're not looking at final scores. We're looking at the underlying metrics, the things that are predictive. And that's what it is. And it's, we started out only using the current season. It was a very dumb system in that regard. Like we were like, we don't want to put our finger on the trigger, blah, blah, blah. But 2 years in, we were like, no, we need priors. And so we used the previous season's data as well. And then we eventually incorporated, we're like, you know what? Quarterbacks make such a difference in the NFL. We need, it was a team-based rating system. It still is, but we modeled a quarterback element of it as well. And so that's kind of what we have now. And it is not, now there's just so much amazing data out there available. Where you see it on the Amazon telecasts, and, this guy's shoulder pad was angled 7 degrees before he made this cut. Like, I don't know what I would do with that data. That's too advanced for me. But Massey-Peabody, we are strictly a team-based rating system. And so, back in 2012, the market was much less efficient overall, and you could blindly bet Massey-Peabody stuff and do quite well. I wouldn't say that's the case now as much, but it's still a good sort of framework and a starting point. And as I mentioned earlier, knowing the weaknesses of your model, that's one thing that, that this is a team-based model. And so it's not going to adjust to, a team that has got hit with injuries, right? Will probably be too on them as a result. And so you can kind of use it as a starting point, knowing that what it's based off of, and then make adjustments yourself if you want. So a good example might be if you think that Tom Brady, use it, like we had a prior on Tom Brady based on how good he's been in the past and all that stuff. And he is old, but he was quite good last year, and the Bucs have not been as good this year on offense. And so you might say, okay, well, I'm holding on too strongly to that prior on Tom Brady. And so, you might say, oh, Massey-Peabody's wrong there, if you believe that. Personally, I think that it's probably, I think that the market is probably overreacting a little bit there too. It's probably some combination, partly the truth, but sorry, I'm just, I go off on tangents. I just keep talking. So you just got to cut me off sometimes.
So go ahead.
You are completely right. Like for me, and it goes very much into qualitative analysis here, but just the eye test and looking at Tom Brady's stats, it's not like the Brett Favre situation where, he goes to the championship game and then the next season comes back for one more ride and just gets beaten up and it's all sad.
That's a Peyton Manning situation, right?
Exactly. Where his carcass was dragged by that defense to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Brady's still good. He's not the problem. He has no problem with arm strength. It's not like he's really turning the ball over more. It's just that the team has been hurt.
He's like going to whoever's wedding it was, right?
Kraft.
Yeah, he's going to Robert Kraft's wedding on Friday rather than going to practice, right? So I don't know. It feels like at least the narrative is the fact that he hasn't been put in the same amount of time and effort as he has in past seasons because he's trying to like save his marriage and do all these other things, and you can't be great unless you give it absolutely everything.
God, what an awful trade-off, blowing up your family to lose to Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and whoever else now.
PJ Walker.
Yeah, PJ Walker.
Walker.
Yeah, speaking of PJ Walker, I'm looking at the Massey-Peabody rankings here, and you see that Carolina is number 30, Washington is 31, the Colts are number 32 here. And you had mentioned that there's you guys have layered in a quarterback component into the ranking. So even though it's a team-based model, there is a quarterback component. And so, I'm looking here, seeing these teams with PJ Walker with backups basically at the bottom of the rankings here. And so, I'm wondering, the move from Matt Ryan to Sam Ehlinger, you now have the Colts. They were number 29 before, now they're number 32. I'm assuming that the Ehlinger news has been taken into account in this, and that is why the Colts are at the very bottom of the rankings here.
Yes, definitely. And maybe Ellinger's better than Matt Ryan at this point. I would bet against it, but if I'm the Colts, at least he's different. He's got upside and all that. But the thing is, a guy making his first start, like, we have data on this in the past to say how much. I don't even remember what round Ellinger was drafted in, but guys typically, even the best guys that end up becoming all pro quarterbacks, don't start there most of the time. Their first start isn't always that way. And so, like, we remember the Russell Wilsons, the RG3s from that same season, I guess. The what's another good example of a guy that just came out guns a-blazing? Did Deshaun Watson? No.
Cam Newton was great his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many guys that, I mean, even if and the thing is, you might have a few good starts and people even like Bailey Zappi, right? And people are like, oh, look, this guy's actually really good. And it's like, well, no, I mean, in one game, there's a lot of randomness in one game. There's a lot of, and there's a lot of, in a weird way, correlated randomness. Like, was the game plan good or not? Was this guy making plays within this framework where it was very easy for him to do because of, this defense wasn't adjusting for this one thing or something like that. You go into another game, it could be a completely different circumstance. But basically, there's a strong prior that basically says, this is your first start. You're not a number one overall quarterback, a really highly touted quarterback. You're probably not going to be that good. And it takes a good amount of data for us to sort of adjust that guy's rating. And so, even if Ellinger lights it up, would he move up more than would his quarterback rating move up more than like a point or so? Probably not.
Yeah. You just mentioned there, kind of the idea of a prior built into this and strong priors. And you mentioned Tom Brady too. And so, looking at the Massey-Peabody ratings, I see that.
Yeah, the Tampa looks too high, don't they? They look too high to me too.
Well, no, I mean, actually, I think they were too high previously, but there's what I would think of as a pretty significant move from around 6 points to around 4.5 points or so this week. Cincinnati moving up from 3 points last week to 4 points this week. Like, for that kind of move, and similar sized moves for some of these other teams from one week to the next, that feels like a kind of large move, like to be able to jump up a point or a point and a half, like Kansas City moving up a point and a half from last week to this week, San Francisco moving down about a point from last week to this week. That feels like a lot. And maybe I'm just wrong. Like, there's obviously, but I'm just saying, like, it feels like at this point of the season, like about the halfway point, entering week 8, for there to be a system that has an adjustment of a point against the spread each week, that feels extreme. Can you talk about that?
So I would have thought most people would have thought the opposite, like only a point, like they blew this team out,
I'll say, sorry to interrupt. I'll say there's a very strong chance that when I'm adjusting my stuff, that I am too slow in getting off of priors.
I think it's better to be. Yeah. I think the mistake people make is overreacting rather than underreacting. And I think the one thing that I think we've been criticized for, and we criticize ourselves for, but is that we are too slow. I feel like we're too slow to update our view on quarterbacks, because it is. I'll tell you the reason for that though is it's really hard to separate the quarterback from the rest of the offense in terms of value.
Yeah,
and in a way, we're going to think that Ellinger is going to be worse, or the Colts are going to be worse with Ellinger. It's going to maybe a bigger drop off because we're like, well, the Colts were awful with Matt Ryan, who we know has a track record of being at least an average to slightly above average quarterback, right? Like, we don't know what was causing the team to underperform there exactly. We have the statistics, but we don't know if that pass, we don't know if the anemic passing is due to the system, if it's due to the players, it's due to Matt Ryan. Like, we can say, according to our eyes, that it's definitely Matt Ryan. That's what I would have said. A lot of it's Matt Ryan, but so in essence, it's going to look like we're not going to assign all this. We're not going to assign all the blame to Matt Ryan this season. And so now if it actually was Matt Ryan that's doing it, then suddenly it's going to look like the rest of the Colts team is very bad. rather than it just being Matt Ryan. But I do
I
think
think
it's better to adjust slowly. And overall, yes, like I feel like some of the actual nominal rating movements are going to, like, you could have a team that doesn't actually move at all, but another team gets a starting quarterback back, and so that'll scale.
Hmm.
The ratings will change a little bit. It'll scale things that way too. So I mean,
Yeah.
that is the biggest reason for movement and ratings, and that's the hardest thing to deal with is freaking quarterbacks and quarterback
Okay.
injuries, and they're
Actually,
they're yeah,
you
they're
say that,
contagious.
and that makes a lot of sense to me because every week, some quarterback will return, a quarterback will get injured, and I'll have to adjust ratings for all of the teams to get it to sort of like the net
QB center,
neutral.
yeah.
Yeah.
and a couple things there because you talk about quarterback injuries versus a situation like Matt Ryan where he's just being replaced. That influences your rankings differently when it's injury versus replacement, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we do. As weird as this sounds, we have a marker, like a designation that says like quarterback out. Like this guy's replacing an injured quarterback, and because we have back in the we have data since 2000, and we've been able to we've gone through and coded out situations where a quarterback was out due to injury. We have like historical injury reports, and so we're able to sort of like knowing that Sam Ellinger is coming in to replace a benched Matt Ryan, our number is going to be a little bit different than if Matt Ryan was injured and Ellinger was forced to come in. It basically it says something about the organization has enough confidence in him that they want to bring him in above Matt Ryan. Just like if Geno Smith got hurt and Drew Lock comes in, our rating on Drew Lock is going to be different than if Drew Lock had won the starting job over Geno Smith. In a way,
Yeah.
like it's common sense if you think about it. It's like, well, I'm going to trust that the coach and the organization knows what's best, knows which player's best. Like how the hell am I going to say that this quarter, they see these guys in practice, et cetera. I mean, that doesn't mean they're always right. And so that's, but it's, I mean, like right now, Washington, we're pretty low on Washington because I have the injury designation thing on Heineke, even though I'm like, I feel awful doing that. So there's a bit of a subjective component there too. I'm like, well, Wentz is garbage. Like Heineke is just as good at this point, probably, which probably isn't true, but I don't know.
You're right. He's better.
He's I think he's better in a offense that he's better on a bad team in a way.
Yeah,
He's more high variance, or he can make more plays himself and do and improvise better than Wentz can.
That's what I'm a little worried about with Ellinger going in because he is much more mobile than Matt Ryan, given that Matt Ryan is 80
like,
years old.
isn't anybody more mobile than Matt Ryan?
Exactly. And it's the same thing with Joe Flacco versus Zach Wilson for me, where that offense saw a little bit of an uptick from the fact that Flacco was throwing 52 times a game, but he was a statue in the pocket. Zach Wilson able to get outside the pocket. There's a little more
But
mobility
Zach
to
Wilson
avoid
has
some of
done
that
like
pressure.
nothing there though.
Well,
He's
look,
looked so bad. But the Jets, yeah.
I fully aware of that, but the offense has been able to have a little more success, partially
They've been
because
running
they're
the
not
ball.
passing. Yeah. They're
And
no longer passing 52 times a game. Rest in peace, Brees Hall. Take my ACL.
Wait. They
please.
were passing, I believe, largely because they were in negative game states where they were playing from behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, one more question here I have about Massey-Peabody ratings and kind of thinking about it's not even so much about the ratings, but I'm looking at them now. One team obviously near the top, and this wouldn't just be your ratings, but everyone's ratings. The Eagles are a team that you guys have number 6. I think for some people they would think that's even a little bit low,
Low,
but
right?
but
Yeah.
clearly one of the better teams in the league. And then you have the Steelers down at number 29. And we have those two teams going up against each other this week. And if we think about the spread in this game, in the offseason market, you have sports books that will release numbers months in advance. This number was 3.5 to 4 in favor of the Eagles, and then opened in the early line around 10.5, and it feels like it could continue to move towards the Eagles as we get towards kickoff. Can you talk a little bit about the prior, sort of like the strong prior, or the strength of the prior, where you can look back to the number from the offseason and say, okay, these teams were in this position, and now over the course of 2 months of game action, we have seen this line move in such a way that it's gone through the 7, gone through the 10,
Yeah,
and it might hit 14. Like there's a chance this happens.
I don't
So
think it hits 14, but
you never know. It probably won't, but like there at some point resistance has to happen. And so kind of the question is like, how do you take that movement into account and kind of know when to get off of certain priors and when the point comes to where it's like this line has moved too far?
so that's interesting. Okay, so you said when to get off priors, and I think the thing is our numbers are gradually departing from the priors. Like in season becomes more and more important every week, and it kind of changes for different things in a way. Like so, we tend to react more quickly to the team than we do to like the quarterback play, because it's very hard in season to sort of separate. Especially if you have the quarterback in the offense, like the quarterbacking that team the entire time. Um, I think in general, they're like, and I think in this case, it's not that Hurts is a completely different quarterback than he was last year. I think he's got a good system. He's got good weapons around him, a good line. Like, I mean, it's a good situation for him. But so there probably are times, and Cade and I have talked about this. Cade actually was like, are there ways that has asked me, like, are there ways we can try to identify like when we're wrong on a prior, where we're like, okay, we need to just depart from this entirely because something has happened enough to show us that this what we believed was wrong. But I think that's really hard to do. And it's certainly it's at least the way we've looked at it, not really possible to just say, okay, this is now we're done with the prior. It's just that the in season is outweighing it. And so in this case, we started the season with Philadelphia as a league average team, or minus 0.05, and Pittsburgh is exactly 3 points worse than that. And now we're at a point where what's the number now? Philadelphia is improved by 3.5 points, and Pittsburgh's worse by about 1.5 or so. And so, they've gone a different way. But if I made these numbers without a prior, it'd be like you would see Philadelphia be way freaking better, and Pittsburgh be way worse. I mean, because Philadelphia, like I'm looking at the these sort of unit grades, which I need to tweet out today at some point. Philadelphia, like they're 90th percentile in pass offense this year. They are 82nd percentile in scoring efficiency offense, which is the ability to translate yards efficiently into points. Mm-hmm. So that'll capture a lot of red zone stuff, special teams, third and fourth down, etc. They're 90th in play success in offense. So they're the only thing they're average in is rushing offense. And on defense, they're 98th percentile in passing defense. So they're 90th percentile passing offense, 98th percentile passing defense. It's a passing league. Like that's pretty freaking good. 78th percentile scoring efficiency defense, 85th percentile play success defense. They've been really, really good across the board. And the question is how much of that is sustainable and how much isn't. And so if we just went off that, we'd have them probably as the second best team in the league. And I actually probably should I'm going to generate a no prior Massey-Peabody number. I got to find code to do that somewhere just to kind of show how it would be different if we went into the season without any beliefs on these teams, without any information. Mm-hmm. We would be, a lot higher in Philadelphia.
And so with some of these teams too, like some of the big changes that you're now starting to make, you see the two teams that jumped the most spots this week, the Seahawks and the Chargers, going in opposite ways, of course. But
we've been low on the Chargers basically the whole time. Like, we were low going into the season on the Chargers, which, I know that they're a trendy pick.
No,
we thought they were half a point better than a league average team going into the season. And I know people thought they were a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah. But it turns out the old adage is true. You can take the Chargers out of San Diego, but you can't take the Chargers out of the Chargers.
Dude, does any team have worse injury luck? Like year after year?
The Ravens recently, but it's just such a consistent trend with this team. And then it's not even just the injury luck, but it doesn't matter who the coach is. It doesn't matter what happens. There almost has to be a quantitative way to just mix in the Chargers-ness of this team, because no one is better at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, and it's just proven time and time again.
Yeah, it wasn't who was the oh god.
Norv Turner.
And wait, who was the no, recent coach got fired?
Oh, the last guy. Was it Vance Joseph? No, Vance Joseph was the Broncos.
Offensive guy. And I'm blank. Yeah, my yeah.
The coach.
What happens when you get old?
Anthony Lynn.
I got the Anthony part, but Anthony Lynn. There we go. Yeah, I always thought Anthony Lynn got kind of a raw deal because exactly as you said, it was the Charger part, not the Anthony Lynn part.
Yeah, I mean Norv Turner got a raw deal. They went like 13-3, and he got fired.
Well, yeah. I mean, the problem is it's the curse of having former Washington coaches.
Yeah,
Norv Turner and Marty Schottenheimer. You bring the curse of the Indian burial ground that's underneath FedEx Field, and it comes with the coaches, I guess. Well, but I guess it didn't go with Kyle. No, it probably did go with Kyle Shanahan to Atlanta.
It definitely went with Kyle Shanahan, but then everybody else on that coach. I mean, you had Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, and who was the third guy? Was it LaFleur?
LaFleur.
Yeah.
That is just a ridiculous coaching tree to branch out there. But going back to the Chargers, yeah, they're snake bitten with the injuries, but then it's still been. I definitely think that play calling hasn't been aggressive enough on this team. I think your rating for them is completely right. They have been a real disappointment.
Well, so what's interesting is, I mean, I was low on them last year too, and I think they seemed, in my opinion, overachieved their peripherals, and a lot of that might have been the play calling, the fact that they just didn't let Justin Herbert throw the ball more. Mm-hmm. But in terms of how good he was on third down and when under pressure, it was like he was really good in the highest leverage situations, and so it made him, in my opinion, sort of look better. It made that team look better than they actually were if you just look at every play. And so this year, they're I assume hasn't been the same magic. I mean, they're 56th percentile on passing offense, but they're below average in everything else basically on offense. So 3rd percentile rushing offense. That's really low.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit before we let you out of here. I want to talk to you a little bit about betting trends, mostly because on this show every week, we hear about Kyle Shanahan as a road favorite, as a home dog. Matt loves using trends in his analysis. And I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, Matt, but I'm curious for your thoughts on how you parse out signal versus noise when it comes to trends that actually mean something. Like there are some that are just a given that you can lay out a rational reasoning for this. The Texas Longhorns 6-1 straight up on the weekend after a Taylor Swift album release. We know that they're being powered.
That one makes sense.
Yeah, we know that they're being powered to victory by the music of Taylor Swift. But what about some of these other ones, like a coach as a favorite, a quarterback as a dog,
Andy Reid off a bye, that type of thing?
When does a trend like that become signal to you?
So I think you can come up with the narrative for basically any trend, like any reasonable trend. I mean, I think I've railed against trends a lot over the years. And I believe one example I tweeted was a few years back was that college football teams that started with the letter O were 58% against, no, I think it was 55% against the spread in the previous 12 years, spanning 700 and something games, which is insanity to think, right? Like, you're like, how could, if it was like, you could look at the same thing, and if there was a rational explanation, you'd be like, well, that's definitely something real because it's 55% over 700 games. So I think part of it is you want to be looking for something, have the narrative in mind before you actually see the trend. I
agree with that.
Ask the question and look for the answer. I think you could find the same thing could exist, but if you're just mining all this data and you find, oh, these are the significant things, can I come up with a rational explanation for it? You've seen that it looks significant. You're going to you can probably come up with some idea, but you have no way of saying whether that idea is actually real or not. I mean, most narratives tend to be, not backed up by numbers probably. So I would say that, yeah, just not just searching brute force for things that turn up significance. But the way I handle it is I look for things that I can quantify, not in terms of a trend against the spread, but if they're, let's say, well, actually that's a bad example, but let's say that Andy Reid teams have, they're 12-1 against this. I have no idea what the number is. Really, really good against the spread off the bye weeks. Well, it's probably because they're like, I'd be like, well, is it an effect on offense? And then I would look and see, are there significant differences? Like if Andy Reid is really good off of bye weeks, and for that to be true, I would assume that there's other coaches that are less good, right? Or that there's this whole distribution of coaches' effects off of bye weeks. It's like if we found that Andy Reid is the only one that is where there's any signal there, to me that would say, okay, that's maybe just an anomaly, a statistical anomaly. But I don't know. Sorry, I'm not explaining this very well. I'd actually make a mixed effects model to look at this, to get all nerdy about it.
No,
But
this
just to see what
good.
the distribution of sorry, I hit the mic. What the distribution of coaching effects in terms of coming off a bye week are, not against the spread, like looking at how the team actually performed. So, I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, if you is thinking about sort of adjacent effects. Like if there's an effect for this coach, there probably effects for other coaches. And if we look at the whole spectrum of other coaches and it just looks like just randomness, if it looks like if it's indiscernible from if you just randomly simulated and, but you have this one coach that's way up here, maybe they're an outlier that really, maybe they're the Wrigley Field of coaches. Who knows? Wrigley in the sense that the wind has more of an impact at Wrigley Field by like a factor of 3 than any other stadium.
Yeah.
That maybe they are, but maybe it's just randomness. So
yeah.
Guys, real quick, I want to talk to you about Sleeper. Sleeper is the fastest growing fantasy platform today with millions of players. You probably already have a fantasy league on there. My friends and I changed over this year and I absolutely love it. It's a game-changing product unlike anything else in the industry. And now you can win on Sleeper by playing their new over-under game. It's super simple. First, in any sport, choose 2 or more players that you like and pick the over-under. For example, rushing yards in a football game or number of points in a basketball game. Then, choose the amount of money you want to enter into the contest. If you pick correctly, you can win anywhere from 2 times to over 20 times the money you put in. The main reason I'm excited about Over-Under on Sleeper is that it's the only app where I can join my friends' contests and play together. It's got a built-in group chat where I can see and copy my group's picks with the tap of a button, along with Over-Under integrated into the fantasy experience itself. It's insanely fun to ride it out together, so stop what you're doing and download Sleeper now to play their new Over-Under game. Have fun with your friends and make some money. Use the promo code BettingPros when you sign up for a Sleeper account today, and Sleeper will automatically credit your account $100 to get you started. Terms and conditions apply. See sleeper.com for details.
So you mentioned, and I agree with everything that you said there. I remember I think this was an episode a long time ago of your podcast with Jeff, where I don't remember exactly. I think it was Dr. Bob you're talking, because he was
yes,
like
Dr. Bob.
and so I
this is like maybe our 5th podcast episode ever, in like early 2017, when we were like making enemies fast. And
so I feel like you said something like, okay, like if you see something in this trend, maybe there's something there that is actually real, but then like quantify it and put it in your model.
Yep.
And so the question is, let's say that someone actually does notice something in a trend, right? And so let's say, for instance, Kyle Shanahan, horrible as a favorite, great as an underdog, right? Like just in terms of like against the spread, like that's a real thing. And then let's say you don't actually have the sophistication to build out a model in terms of like the coding of kind of like factoring in different things in terms of game script and like game state. But you actually do dig into the numbers and you see, okay, when he's a favorite, he calls plays in this way. And when he's an underdog, or like when the 49ers are trailing, he calls plays in this way. And so you can actually sort of, even if you just sort of bucket things out, you can see the difference between how plays are called, how the offense performs, but you actually don't have the sophistication of incorporating that into your model. Mm-hmm. So if that is the case, let me rephrase that. Incorporating it in terms of like a prediction, but if you have a model that is just based on sort of like against the spread things, maybe you just sort of try to quantify it by saying, I think that's worth half a point or whatever it is. But let's say someone actually does notice something, but they don't have the model. In that case, how do you think someone should approach it?
Well, if you don't have a model, what you're trying to do is just find, and you don't have access to a model that's, I don't know, that, right. What you're trying to do if you don't have a model is try to find something the market isn't accounting for in a way that you think there's signal to.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think that the market is not incorporating the fact that Kyle Shanahan his teams tend to play down to their opponents or play up to their opponents, which is, I assume, what they would be doing if they tend to do better when they're a dog than and worse when they're a favorite. They'd be playing her up or down to their quality of their opposition. If you thought the market wasn't incorporating that, then you would say, okay, they're a 13-point favorite. I think that they're, I don't think the market's incorporating that. So I think there's value betting the underdog, right? I mean, but in terms of, I don't know in terms of if I didn't have a model, how I would handle it. I like what you're talking about in terms of like granularity and saying, okay, well, is it because of the style of play at this point? Or, I mean, there could also be just the fact that it's like a preparation thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know how
there could be a lot of parts about why it's the case. Yeah.
Is it because if you're a 3-point underdog or a 3-point favorite, you're not expected to have like drastically different like amounts of time in different game states, like different, but not like drastically different versus like a 10-point favorite and a 10-point underdog. And so just in terms of like for props, just predicting like a team's pass rate is a function of the point spread because the same team, I mean, the whole point there is just that if you're trailing, you're going to be throwing the ball more. And if you're up, you're going to be running the ball more relative to your baseline overall. And so certainly there could be a impact in that regard though. So I like that. I like the idea of approaching it that way, but if there was an effect, I would look at it in terms of like trying to see if it's game state based or like opponent skill based, like how much is each. And then again, I'd be interested in seeing if like, cause presumably if Kyle Shanahan is different in this regard than other coaches or other teams, then there would be some other coaches that maybe are the opposite too. Like and so for me being able to sort of gauge the effect, if there's any other, the effect in the whole population would, I guess, give me greater clarity on how significant the Kyle Shanahan effect really is.
Now, guys,
sorry, I know I didn't answer your question.
No. I mean, no, you answered it in exactly the way I thought you would. Like it was a very Rufus answer.
I mean, I didn't have an answer, so I just gerrymandered a little bit.
No, it's
not gerrymander. What did I say? Gerrymander. I didn't gerrymander.
He's filibustered.
I filibustered. Gerrymander. Oh my God.
Guys, Rufus, we've kept you here more than long enough. We're going to keep you here a tiny bit longer if that's okay.
I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying it. Keep it going as long as you guys want.
I'm glad most of our guests hate the show. So now Thursday night football, it is a battle of mobile quarterbacks here as the Ravens take on the Buccaneers. And Tampa, they're going to be 1 point to 1.5 point, even 2 points. You can get, it's running the gamut here right now. Circa has it at 2, but our friends at BetMGM have it at 1.5 right now. So if you wanted to take that $1,000 free bet that you get by signing up for BetMGM using the promo code BettingPros, then you might be looking at taking the Bucs at 1.5, or you might be going to the Ravens, who are the road favorites here right now in this one. Matt, where are you going in this game? And this really brings it back to our adjustments here of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how far we are bringing them down. Rufus, what are you thinking about the Bucs? 1.5 point home dogs now.
Yeah, so my number would be Bucks minus 2.9 actually. So small favorite, which you can call me insane or whatever if you want, that's fine. But I wouldn't say that that's the, if I was booking this game, I wouldn't book it at minus 2.5 or minus 3 to the Bucks. But I guess it comes down to whether you think at least I'm direct, like Massey-Peabody's directionally correct there. And if people are a little bit overreacting to how the Bucs have looked so far, and I think they probably are. The market is overreacting a little bit, but so if forced to choose, I would choose the Bucs. But as I said, I actually have not been betting NFL sides, which is kind of too bad because I feel like I would have crushed it last week. Every week I do the unabated pick'em contest. All 2 weeks that I've actually done it, I've gone based on the strong Massey-Peabody plays, and I think I'm like 8-2. So I should. I mean, who knows? I might have. I went 0-20 the other weeks, but that's because I didn't put any picks in. But
You miss every shot you don't take.
exactly.
Matt, what do you think?
No, I was just saying. So I would lean Tampa here for sure. If I had
Matt,
to choose.
how about you?
Yeah, directionally, I'm with Rufus, and so I asked him earlier about like, hey, you guys 1 week from the next adjusted by a point or a point and a half. That seems like a lot. Like I hardly ever adjust that much week to week, but last week to this week, I did it for Tampa Bay. But I think it's because I stayed on them so long up to this point in the season, and so I'm still leaning Tampa Bay at this point. I have it Tampa Bay favored by 0.5 points, and so it's not like there's a massive difference, going across zero, but I do have them favored, relative to where they are at this point, by 2 or 2.5 points. I will say though, in the look ahead market, this was Baltimore +3. And that's the bet that I made because I saw that number and I, based on what I had at the time, and just based on market sentiment in the games last week, I thought, okay, I think this number is going to move towards Baltimore. So I bet it. So that's the position I have. But based on the numbers in the market now and the projections I have, I think Tampa Bay is the side.
All right. Well, if you guys are both going to say that, I am going to get out of here and go rush to bet this line because that's a pretty good endorsement for me. But guys, thank you so much, Rufus. Thank you so much for being here today. One more time, where can people find you and the great work you're doing around the internet?
You can find at least the mediocre work on my Twitter page, Rufus Peabody. You can find Bet the Process podcast and unabated.com. If you haven't signed up, we have a 7-week free trial. All these cool betting tools that can help make you a smarter bettor.
And by the way, I should give the plug. Rufus is incredibly sharp, and he has Captain Jack there with him at Unabated, and Dan Fabrizio. Shout out Dan, my former boss at one point at Fantasy Labs. So a great group that they got there. And Tom, you are now part of the Unabated team, which is very exciting.
That is true. I am working on getting the same contract clause that Rufus has that allows us to not go bald. It's a very important sticking point here.
Yeah, it's yeah.
All right, guys.
I have to negotiate hard for that one, I have to say.
Yeah, it's an important one to keep in there. But for now, guys, that is going to do it for us. We'll be back here on Thursday breaking down the slate as always. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. Don't forget to hit that like button. And of course, let's cash those tickets.